In the twilight after creation, the great god Izanagi emerged from the underworld. Yomi, the land of the dead, grief-stricken after failing to retrieve his beloved wife, Izanami. Seeking purification from the filth and darkness of the underworld, Izanagi performed a sacred cleansing ritual in a flowing river. As he bathed, 3 powerful deities were born from his body, each emerging from a different part during this act of spiritual renewal. From his left eye was born Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess, destined to rule the high plane of heaven, Takamagahara. From his right eye, Tsukuyomi, the serene moon god, came forth. But it was from Izanagi's nose, with a thunderous breath of divine force, that Susanoo was born, the storm god, fierce and wild, embodying the raging seas and howling winds. From the very beginning, Susanoo was unlike his siblings. While Amaterasu glowed with calm brilliance and Tsukuyomi shimmered with silent elegance, Susanoo roared like crashing waves and stirred the air with unpredictable fury. His divine presence shook the skies and churned the waters. He was a force of nature given form, emotional, impulsive, and prone to extremes of anger and sorrow. Even as a child god, he was known for wailing so loudly that mountains trembled and rivers overflowed. Though Izanagi had given each child dominion over part of the cosmos, Amaterasu the heavens, Tsukuyomi the night, and Susanoo the seas, Susanoo refused to accept his role peacefully. Obsessed with the loss of his mother, Izanami, who he had never met but whose absence haunted him, Susanoo constantly wept and lashed out, causing floods and tempests that disturbed the realms of both gods and mortals. In his despair, Susanoo neglected his divine duties. Crops withered from the salty winds he stirred. Waves swallowed shorelines. His sorrow turned to rage and rage to destruction. The heavens could not hold his chaos much longer. Eventually, Izanagi confronted him, furious with his son's behavior. In a thunderous voice, Izanagi cast Susanoo out, demanding that he either take his post over the seas seriously or leave the realm of the gods. Susanoo, trembling with suppressed fury, chose instead to leave, but not before one last visit to his sister, Amaterasu, in the celestial heavens. It was a meeting that would ignite a chain of cosmic events and plunge the world into darkness. But even in this first chapter, the seeds of Susanoo's legacy were planted, not just as a destroyer, but as a divine force destined for redemption and glory. Banished by his father, Susanoo stood at a crossroads between duty and rebellion. Though the seas were his to command, his heart still seethed with grief over the mother he never knew. Instead of embracing his divine role, his thoughts turned upward, to the heavens where his sister Amaterasu reigned in radiant splendor. Driven by a volatile mix of desperation, pride, and a need for recognition, Susanoo ascended to Takamagahara, the heavenly plane. He claimed he wanted to bid farewell to his sister before his exile, but the gods whispered of deeper intentions. Susanoo's presence crackled like a gathering storm. His arrival shook the heavenly lands, his wild demeanor alarming even the most steadfast deities. Amaterasu, cautious yet curious, met him. Suspecting a challenge to her divine authority, she proposed a symbolic contest of trust and power. Each would produce deities from the other's sacred item, Amaterasu from Susanoo's sword, and Susanoo from her jeweled necklace. Though the results favored harmony, Susanoo's true nature soon erupted. He began to unleash chaos upon Takamagahara. He tore down the sacred rice fields, defiled holy grounds, and hurled excrement into her palace. In his most unforgivable act, he rampaged into Amaterasu's weaving hall, hurling a flayed horse through the roof and terrifying her maidens. One fell dead, her blood staining the divine fabric of the heavens. Amaterasu, heartbroken and ashamed, could no longer bear the disorder. In sorrow and fear, she withdrew into the heavenly rock cave, sealing herself away and plunging the world into utter darkness. The sun vanished, crops failed, evil spirits crept out from the shadows. Despair gripped gods and mortals alike. With Amaterasu gone and the celestial order shattered, the gods could no longer tolerate Susanoo's fury. His grief had become destruction, and his defiance had cast the world into ruin. The Celestial Council convened. For his crimes against heaven, Susanoo was exiled, cast down from the heavens, and stripped of his divine status. Susanoo's journey from sorrowful son to furious outcast reached its breaking point in the heavenly realm of Takamagahara. When he arrived under the pretense of bidding farewell to his sister Amaterasu, the sun goddess, the earth trembled and the skies darkened, not from awe, but from dread. His intentions were clouded by deep-seated resentment, born from the pain of losing his mother, and the frustration of being misunderstood and rejected by his father Izanagi. Amaterasu, ever cautious and wise, sensed the instability in her brother's heart. Though she allowed him into her radiant realm, she did so warily. To prove his sincerity, they engaged in a sacred ritual, a divine oath-making contest. From Amaterasu's necklace, Susanoo produced 5 male gods. From Susanoo's sword, Amaterasu produced 3 female goddesses. They declared the offspring from Amaterasu's act to be more noble, interpreting it as her spiritual victory. Humiliated and driven by a bruised ego, Susanoo descended into chaos. His divine rage spilled out into violent acts. He trampled Amaterasu's rice fields, the sacred source of sustenance for the heavens. He tore down boundary markers, desecrating the carefully balanced divisions of the realm. He defiled holy halls, scattering excrement in sacred spaces, as if to mock the purity his sister upheld. But the final act shattered the heavens, literally and symbolically. Susanoo stormed into Amaterasu's sacred weaving hall, where her maidens worked tirelessly crafting garments for the gods. In a manic fit, he flayed a celestial horse, hurling its mutilated body through the roof. The shock and horror sent the maidens into panic, and one, in her terror, pierced herself fatally with the weaving tools. Blood soaked the divine floor. It was no longer just mischief. Susanoo had committed sacrilege. Amaterasu, overwhelmed by grief, shame, and rage, could not endure it. She retreated into the heavenly rock cave, Amano Iwado, sealing herself within and plunging the world into eternal darkness. Without her light, the balance of nature fractured. Crops withered, the tides fell into disarray, and vile creatures emerged from the shadows to wreak havoc across the land. Both heaven and earth trembled in despair. The gods of Takamagahara convened a celestial tribunal. Susanoo's defiance had broken the divine order. The cost of his pain had become everyone's suffering. With grim consensus, they stripped Susanoo of his divine authority, shattered his sword, and banished him from heaven. Cast down from Takamagahara, Susanoo tumbled through the skies, his once mighty figure reduced to a wandering storm. No longer welcome among the gods, he descended into the mortal world, a god without a place, a storm without a course. Banished from the heavens, Susanoo plummeted through the skies like a falling star, his stormy aura trailing behind him. Cast out not only from Takamagahara, but also from the favor of his divine kin, he landed upon the shores of the mortal realm, his pride fractured and his name stained. Alone beneath the vast skies of earth, Susanoo wandered, his once thunderous steps now muffled by humility. The winds that had once raged around him grew quieter, mirroring the turmoil that brewed inside. In the stillness of exile, regret began to take root. He replayed his reckless deeds, the shattered weaving hall, the frightened maidens, his sister's anguished retreat into the cave, and a heavy silence hung upon his shoulders. Though divine, he had let his sorrow become destruction, and now he was left with nothing but the echoes of his own fury. But even in exile, Susanoo remained a god, and gods, like storms, are never static. With time, a new resolve formed within him, not to reclaim his lost place through vengeance, but to seek redemption through worthy deeds. Thus, Susanoo began his journey through the mortal lands of Ashihara, no Nakatsukuni, the central reed plains. His path took him to the region of Izumo, where dark rumors whispered of a monstrous threat, an 8-headed serpent that devoured maidens and haunted the riverbanks. This cursed beast, Yamada no Orochi, had claimed the lives of 7 daughters from a grieving couple, and now their last child stood in peril. Here Susanoo saw a chance, not for glory, but to act with honor, a way to reclaim the dignity he had lost. With storm still in his blood and purpose newly in his heart, Susanoo prepared to face the serpent. Exiled from the heavens, the storm god Susanoo descended to the mortal realm of Ashihara no Nakatsukuni, weary and heavy-hearted. The once arrogant deity, whose rage had darkened the celestial plane, now wandered the lands as a solitary figure, cloaked in remorse and reflection. The vastness of earth humbled him. Unlike the ordered skies above, the mortal realm was a place of fragility. Rivers flowed not by divine will, but by terrain. People lived not in immortality, but in the delicate balance between harvest and hunger, peace and fear. As Susanoo wandered, he came to the province of Izumo, a land both beautiful and sorrowful, where green valleys whispered tales of divine intervention and hidden dangers. It was here, near the banks of the river Hai, that he encountered an elderly couple weeping beneath a dying tree. Their names were Shinazuchi and Tenazuchi, and beside them stood their trembling daughter, a maiden of exceptional grace named Kushinadahime. Moved by their sorrow, Susanoo asked the reason for their despair. The old couple told him of the dreadful Yamada no Orochi, an 8-headed and 8-tailed serpent with eyes like burning fire and a body so vast it spanned 8 valleys and 8 hills. For 7 years, the monstrous creature had descended from the mountains once a year to devour one of their daughters. Now only Kushinadahime, their youngest, remained. Her time, they feared, had come. Susanoo's heart stirred. Perhaps once he would have turned away. But now, with his fall fresh in memory and a need for purpose kindling within him, he saw this not as a coincidence, but as fate, a trial placed before him by the very heavens he had disgraced. He vowed to save Kushinadahime, but requested her hand in marriage should he succeed. The parents agreed, and with that, Susanoo began his preparations. He devised a cunning plan, not by brute strength alone, but by guile and strategy. He had the family brew 8 vats of potent sake and build 8 platforms outside their home. Upon each, they placed 1 vat. When Yamada no Orochi arrived, slithering with the sound of thunder and a stench that withered the grass, the creature found the sake. Curious and intoxicated by its aroma, each of its heads drank greedily from the vats. Slowly, the beasts succumbed to the alcohol, its movements sluggish, its eyes drowsy. Then, with the strength of a god and the fury of a repentant soul, Susanoo struck. He cleaved the serpent apart, one head after another, until its massive body lay still. From the remains, Susanoo discovered a shining object hidden within the serpent's tail, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword. This sacred blade would later become one of the 3 imperial treasures of Japan, a symbol of divine rule. Susanoo, recognizing the sword's significance, sent it as a gift to his sister Amaterasu, as a token of reconciliation. With the serpent vanquished and peace restored, Susanoo took Kushinadahime as his bride. He built a magnificent palace in Izumo, where the winds carried not the howl of storms, but psalms of peace and divine harmony. Here, the once banished god began anew, not just in title, but in spirit. His tale of redemption had begun. Though cast out from the heavens, Susanoo's journey on earth was not without divine design. As he wandered the mortal lands, weighed by exile and longing, he began to see that his fate was not merely punishment, but a path toward redemption. In the land of Izumo, among humble mortals, Susanoo would find a chance to rise not as a destroyer, but as a savior. It was there, in the shadow of the distant mountains, that the cries of sorrow reached his ears, cries not of the gods, but of a mortal family haunted by grief and fear. A monstrous force loomed over them, one unlike any Susanoo had ever faced. Yamada no Orochi, the eight-headed serpent of legend. As the wind howled and the earth trembled beneath the weight of the coming terror, Susanoo stood at a crossroads, not of geography, but of spirit. His next actions would define not just his fate on earth, but his place in the eternal lore of gods and men, and thus began the battle that would echo through the ages, the storm god versus the serpent, chaos met with cunning, and destruction met with purpose. It would be this moment, sharp as a blade and radiant as the sun, that would carve the first step in Susanoo's redemption and shape the legacy of a fallen god rising anew. As Susanoo wandered the fertile lands of Izumo, he encountered an old man and woman weeping beside their last remaining daughter, Kushinadaheim. The air around them was thick with sorrow. They were once the proud parents of 8 daughters, but year after year, a monstrous serpent, Yamada no Orochi, with 8 heads and 8 tails, had come to devour one of their children. Now only Kushinada remained, and the time of the serpent's return was drawing near. Moved by their plight, and perhaps stirred by a desire to reclaim honor lost in the heavens, Susanoo offered his aid, but not without condition. If he were to save their daughter, she would become his wife. The parents, with no other hope, tearfully agreed. Susanoo sprang into action. He observed the beast's pattern, noted its enormous size, blood-red eyes, and bodies so vast they stretched across mountain valleys. It was no creature to confront head-on. Brute strength alone would not suffice. This battle required cunning, a lesson the once impulsive storm god had learned in exile. He devised a clever strategy. He transformed Kushinada into a comb and placed her safely in his hair, then instructed the parents to prepare 8 vats of strong sake, rice wine, placing each before a gate built for each of Orochi's heads. When the beast finally arrived, it sniffed the air and was seduced by the potent aroma of the wine. One by one, each head plunged into a vat, greedily drinking until the serpent was too drunk to stand. With a mighty roar, Susanoo drew his sword and attacked. Lightning cracked the skies and thunder boomed across the plains as he struck with precision, severing each of the great serpent's heads in turn. Blood flooded the land, rivers turned red, and the monstrous body writhed and collapsed. But within the tail of the beast, Susanoo found something extraordinary, a divine blade hidden in the serpent's flesh. He named it Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword, a weapon of celestial origin. Knowing its power was not for him alone, Susanoo later presented it to the heavens as a peace offering to his sister, Amaterasu. This sword would go on to become one of the 3 sacred treasures of Japan, a symbol of rightful rule and divine lineage. This act marked a turning point in Susanoo's life. Through this act of bravery and selflessness, he not only saved a family and claimed a bride, but also proved his worth to the world of gods and mortals alike. No longer the reckless destroyer, Susanoo had become a protector, a hero, and a god capable of change. The slaying of Orochi was not just the defeat of a monster, it was the slaying of the chaos within Susanoo himself. Through this triumph, he began to repair the rift with Amaterasu and reclaim his place in the celestial balance. The scent of blood faded from the earth, and in its place bloomed peace. With Orochi vanquished and the people of Izumo safe once more, the once feared storm god Susanoo stood transformed. His fury, once so wild it tore through the heavens, had been tempered by compassion and wisdom. The cries of mortals he had once ignored now moved his heart. Their safety had become his purpose. In marrying Kushinadaheim, he found not just a partner but a tether to humanity, a reason to protect rather than punish. He began to build a home in the earthly realm, planting seeds of culture and civilization. Rivers were tamed, sacred sites blessed, and new traditions sown. The divine sword he had claimed from Orochi's tail, Kusanagi no Tsurugi, he offered not as a trophy, but as a sign of reconciliation, a gift sent skyward to Amaterasu, the sister he once defied. The gods above took notice. This was not the same Susanoo who had defiled sacred halls and plunged the world into chaos. This was a god remade, scared by exile, softened by love, and ennobled by deeds. And so the heavens stirred with whispers of his return. But before Susanoo could ascend once more, his journey would continue, not through war, but through legacy. From his union with Kushanada would come descendants who would walk between gods and mortals, bearing the symbols of divine authority. The story was not yet finished. From storm and sorrow had risen a protector whose bloodline would shape the future of Japan itself. With the storm of his youth behind him, Susanoo rooted himself in the earthly realm of Izumo. No longer the wild and reckless god who once shattered the heavenly weaving hall, he now took up the mantle of protector and patriarch. Alongside his wife, the gentle Kushanada Haim, whom he had saved from Orochi's monstrous wrath, he laid the foundations of a new divine lineage, one destined to intertwine with the fate of the Japanese people. From their union sprang generations of kami, including the powerful deity Okumanushi, who would later become a central god of creation, nation-building, and medicine. Okumanushi's trials and triumphs, much like his father's, reflected courage, cunning, and compassion, carrying forward the redemptive arc begun by Susanoo. Through his descendants, Susanoo's once turbulent energy was transformed into wisdom and guidance, serving mortals rather than terrifying them. Though Susanoo remained in the mortal realm for many years, tales of his strength and deeds echoed even in the high plains of Takamagahara. His gift of the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the divine sword found within Orochi's tail, was received by his sister Amaterasu as a symbol of reconciliation. Alongside the mirror, Yata no Kagami, and jewel, Yasakani no Magatama, it became one of the 3 sacred treasures of Japan, carried by Ninigi no Mikoto, Amaterasu's grandson, when he descended to rule the earth, bridging heaven and humanity. Though Susanoo never formally rejoined the celestial court, his legacy was firmly woven into the fabric of divine harmony. He was no longer seen as merely the bringer of storms, but as the catalyst of renewal, a god whose fall and redemption gave rise to heroes, nations, and the very imperial bloodline of Japan. Temples and shrines rose in his name, none more revered than the grand Izumo Taisha, where even today, prayers are whispered to the once exiled storm god. From the heavens to the sea, from fury to fatherhood, Susanoo's journey became one of the most enduring legends, a tale of chaos, loss, courage, and the hard-won peace that follows transformation. And so, the god of storms did not vanish with the winds. He remained, ever present in the thunder that rolls across distant skies, a reminder that even the fiercest force can one day bring clarity, purpose, and light.